I know I pulled an all-nighter last night, which was not my greatest moment, but I am tired.
uh, I think we're live. I think we're hello, everybody.
I know I pulled an all-nighter last night, which was not my greatest moment, but I am tired.
I think you need to mute your YouTube. I think we're live. I think we're hello, hold on, everybody.
I know I pulled an all-nighter last night.
It
It
might
might
be
be
you.
you.
I
I
don't
don't
have
have
it
it
open
open
yet.
yet.
So I think you need to mute your. All right, sorry guys. 1 second. I'm gonna kick you out for 1 second, Ellie, and we'll get back in. Okay, 1 second.
It might be you. I don't have it open yet.
That's so weird. Why is it? Oh, it is me. It was me. It was me. Okay, let me get her back in. Sorry, Chris was having a moment. Um, I didn't realize that it was open in the other window. Um, Ellie, if you want to jump back on that link, hold on. Hey everyone, me just having a Chris technology moment again. You know, I used to fix computers in high school, and look at me now. Can't even operate this. There we go. Okay, there you are. So it was totally. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, totally my fault. I didn't realize that the YouTube window was open in my screen, so it was like duplicating. So I thought it was on you. So I unfairly blamed you, and I'm sorry.
That's
That's
okay.
okay. Well, hello everyone. Good to see you. We It's good to see everyone tonight. We have a cool little live for you. We're gonna be introducing you to the Canon map that we finally finalized. Now, some of you have seen the map of Fortuna when it was like in the early development. This is like the canonized maps. We finished it, and I'm really excited to reveal that to you guys. And I want to introduce you to Ellie Lenz, who's our map maker here for Flux Destiny and Flux Fantasy. Hey, Ellie.
Hello, hello. Happy to be here.
It's good to have you. You are. It's so great to have like an official map maker here because our own cartographer, like we need that. And I've always loved. I talk a lot about how I love bringing in people who have um, different specialties in different creative areas. And not only that, you're also an amazing illustrator too. And so
Thank
she's
you.
done really awesome work and bring in new perspectives. And so um, I love bringing in people who can do that. Like everyone on live knows Ella. So we've got Ellie and Ella. And so bringing in ideas so that we can make ideas better and bigger, you know? So why don't you introduce yourself, a little bit about your background so everyone knows who you are?
Yeah, hello. Well, I've been introduced as Ellie. I won't introduce myself as a fake name now. But I work on all the maps that we're doing right now for Flex Destiny. It's been super cool. A little bit about my background is I studied in animation and I did a lot of illustration stuff while I was in college. And in my post grad life, I have been just working on so many cool projects and having a blast getting to work on these cool opportunities. When I was younger, I played a lot of tabletop RPGs with my brothers. So the sort of reroute of getting to work on RPG maps is not super unfamiliar to me. I know a lot about them, and so it's been great to just get to sort of make the art that you grew up on. So it's been super fun.
It's so funny because the minute that I turned to Ella and was like, we had so much going on, I said, we need our map person. Like, who is going to be our map maker? Because I don't have time to do this too and to do it right. And I wanted someone to focus on it. Like, she didn't hesitate. She was like, we got it. We got to go with Ellie. She's like, I know exactly who to call. So I was really, really glad that
I
she
love
did
that.
that. So we spent the last several weeks working together on. I presented to Ellie the old map of Fortuna, the one that was like my initial concept, and I gave her some ideas. So I'm going to show you guys first the old map. So I'm going to switch views so we can see that. And hold on, I don't want to accidentally reveal the map. until it's ready. Okay, so we're gonna go to the old map, and okay, so this is the old map on the screen, and this was like the one that I had originally concepted for the world of Flux Destiny. And there were a couple things that, as I was developing the universe and as we were developing Flux Fantasy, the RPG, that, by the way, public beta launches the 23rd, and you absolutely need to go and sign up for our big live stream that we're doing, and we're launching it that day. So I hope you guys join. In fact, Ellie and I got to play a game together, and where we did a whole story written by Ella. It was a lot of fun last week. Um, when I did this particular map, it was I feel like I didn't think big enough because it was done before I had thought about Flux Fantasy and more stories in this universe. And so the map was relatively contained, where you had Fortuna and all these other countries that were nearby that were very close to it. And as I started to develop the idea more, and as we started developing the larger universe of the RPG, I needed to create something that gave more opportunities for more nationalities that people could have, more places where we could have bigger adventures. So I had to create the whole Earth, like Flux Destiny Earth, and Ellie and I are working on that right now. That's one of the things on our list. I've already kind of laid out in general what it looks like, and I've moved some things around. That's one of the benefits of being a creator, is you have these godlike powers that you can move entire countries across the world and build continents, you know. Um, but the some of the when you see the new map, you'll see that I have moved many of these countries out of the way uh, into their own spaces. You won't see them yet on the main world map because that's not available just yet. But they all still exist. They've just some of them have been shifted around. And in doing so, I made a world that was bigger and that we could tell more adventures in, because it doesn't have to just be in this particular region of Fortuna. So that's kind of the thought process behind it. Um, Ellie, I'm curious about your initial thoughts when I first shared with you like my concept map, what you thought, and then what was going through your mind as we were talking before I reveal the main one. What things kind of came through your mind as we were talking about it?
Yeah, well, I definitely still love the initial map. I think the sort of colored countries and everything was super legible, super fun, and it was nice to see that there was a lot of different locations, different cities, more pertinent cities. It definitely is a very awesome map still. I'm not
Thank
discrediting it
you.
anyway. I love this map. It's very good. But definitely maybe the one thing that was lacking that we really tried to push in the next one is just like character and having a little bit more depth to the map than just, hey, here's a black title name that is just on this background. So we tried to add a lot more character, uniqueness to the world, and thought about, hey, why are these locations where they are? What is the landscape around these things? What can we push? What can we think about aside from just like and mountains and sea? So hopefully we did a good job. Hopefully everyone likes it. But that was sort of running through my head was just give it more, make it cooler.
Right. And also working with the scale. You and I worked so much on the scale because Fortuna itself is supposed to be about maybe 2/3 the size of the United States. So we had to, when we were working on the map together, we were like, okay, we need to, like, one thing that was missing was rivers, right? I had no real rivers in this thing, and we wanted to add more topographical like variety in the map so that we had like, you know, swampy areas and tropical areas, things like that around it. And so we found ways to do that. I'm going to reveal the map now, and we'll go over it with Ellie, and I'll share with you guys the changes and things that we've made. And let me get that up. And then we also developed, which I'll show you as part of this, the state, like the states of Fortuna and everything like that. So first, I'm going to show you kind of the big overview map, and then I'll show you more detailed maps. So let me get that set up here. All right, here we go. All right, so this is the map. This is like the main big map. and then we're going to go into like the more detailed maps from there. So this is it. This is so I'll zoom in a little bit. We made some major changes to the map. We moved Andromeda was way a little bit more up here. We moved it to the coast. Um, Ellie had worked in some rivers. We also moved in this portion of the map that was originally Paragon. Paragon has been moved to another part of the world, and we created a new part of Fortuna called Ad Astra, and it's a rainforest-like region that normally would not that area would not be have that kind of climate, but it's has that climate because of a giant rupture that's nearby that has completely affected um, the um, the in the climate in that area. A lot of things stayed the same, like where we had the big mountains, the big cities are all in their same places. But what Ellie really did that was really awesome with this in a number of different ways was that she helped kind of put variety where we needed it in the topography, but made it naturally flow. It's not like, oh, you're going to have like an icy area right next to a swamp, right? Like it has to be within context to make sense. But also add in our major highways and things like that in here. I'm going to show you real quick about anything you want to comment on your process on making this, Ellie, like your translation of what I gave you
Yeah,
to this.
yeah. So as you mentioned, talking a lot about like landscape, it was super fun because this is sort of USA adjacent. I took a lot of just like height, like elevation maps from the United States and tried to pull a lot from what mountain ranges actually exist in the world, our world, not this one, but and thinking about like climate and those sorts of things. So it was super fun to work a little bit more with like a real world reference, and then get to like manipulate it and like have a great time just drafting out some cool little land masses and little islands and rivers, and just getting it to work all together.
And it's funny because we already have some. I'm going to zoom in to help. So I'm noticing that in the chat, some people are already noticing like things like the our shuttle area, right, where we had the where the failed space program takes place nearby Orion, which was something we spent a lot of time talking about. Well, where's that going to be? And where are our national parks going to be? Where's our Fort Knox, for example? Because Fortuna goes through a lot of gold for the creation of Tauruses. Um, where are we going to do that? Let me switch to a different map so you can kind of see the borders. It makes it a little easier. Here's a map that kind of draws out the borders of the country so you can kind of see it. Because in the original, what I showed you before was kind of like just the general area. Here's the map of Fortuna now, like the finalized, Canon map. You'll notice that this area that we talked about up here, that's called Ad Astra, most of it is rainforest. It's actually very sparsely populated in this part of the country, but because we've got these giant mountain ranges right up here, and Ad Astra Metropolis, which is like this kind of almost like a Miami like a city. It's a giant city on this coast, tropical city. It's out here, and it's really separated from the rest of Fortuna by this giant rainforest that's right here that takes a large chunk of the state. To give you a little more context, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the states look like. Fortuna is the United States of Fortuna, right? So it's a U.S. equivalent in this universe. And so we created 6 different states for the country. And Ellie helped me. Like I had an initial breakdown of it, but then she helped kind of reorient the borderlines for the different states. And each state represents, pardon me, kind of general areas within the United States. Like Orion is very much like Texas. It's very much a Texas-inspired part of Fortuna. Andromeda is more like California. Ganymede is more like the Midwest. Chicago, Indiana, all that, the Illinois, Indiana, that whole area there. So you can find like the Izar region is very much like the Pacific Pacific Northwest. So we kind of have the different parts of the United States kind of captured in these in these states. So these are the official states now. So this is canon now. All right. So you got me on camera saying that. So this is canon. Okay.
It can't change.
You can't change.
We
Never
definitely
can never
won't make
change.
more cool maps.
We never will. We never will make any changes ever again, which is an absolute lie. Obviously, we'll, you know, over time, naturally, as we develop the world more, you know, there'll be things that we add in, some little tweaks here and there, but this is it. This is the one. So let me take the state outlines out, and we will zoom in here. So let's look at some of the big areas on this map. When we look at, for example, Andromeda, which is the center of it's not only Fortuna's capital, but it's also the center of like the carmistry industry, basically in Fortuna and the world. It's very much was built around the idea of following an LA-like feel, right? So if you look at how Los Angeles is built, you've got the core of Los Angeles, and it's built in this giant megalopolis, right, of all these kind of connected cities that all sprawl together. And Andromeda is built the same way. And so that was one of the reasons why we moved it also closer to the coast, because it was always meant to be an allegory to Los Angeles, basically. So we wanted to make it match a little more. What were some of the challenges when you were doing this, Ellie, when you were helping me kind of sort this particular area out? Did you have any particular challenges with this part?
I think the biggest thing was just making sure that it all fit. Honestly, just trying to get the highways and the interstate to not overlap on the title images or the titles of the cities. Um, and then I think just making sure that we didn't overpopulate it with state parks, which I think are one of my favorite little details about this map. Which originally in the first sort of pass of this, I had probably 20 state parks
Yeah.
near California, just because there's like a large amount of them in the actual world. So I was like, oh, why not? Why don't we throw them all in there? But it was getting a little cluttered, so I'm glad we sort of trimmed those trees. But I'll
I
still
will
miss
say
them.
I will say that no one can blame you for like not trying, because there were so many state parks that Fortuna was just like this like haven for camping at one point.
Hmm.
So it was very good. Um, Another thing too that I really liked is that we started adding in like, okay, well, where are major like international airports and regional airports, so you can see the difference between the kind of um, plane icons we use. So the trees are the national parks. These yellow highways are like the major freeways, and then you've got like the more minor freeways in this orange color. Um, so you can kind of see how all these fit together. Um, I particularly loved what you did here with when we were working on the Ad Astra region, where originally it was just this giant rainforest, and Ellie was saying that we needed more water, you know, and so she kind of created this like swampy region here, which I thought was really cool. Um, what made you? Did you just follow the natural contours of the land? Like, what made you do this?
Well, okay, so this sort of region isn't necessarily has any climate adjacent comparison to where it is. If you would compare it to the United States, it'd be much too warm, much too tropical. But the biggest inspiration was sort of the idea that we didn't have anything that was quite like marshland islandy in the map previous. Like we had like some little islands, but I thought it'd be cool to have a very like highly like waterway concentrated area. So like there would probably be more a lot more like sailing and like boats and different like dams and canals in this area. So I wanted somewhere on the map where we could have a cool experience where you could sail through this pass with all the little winding streams. Thought it would just be really fun.
What I think one of the big challenges when you're creating a map like this or a country like this is that it's very easy like to want to put every possible biome in here, and it's just not it's not possible. In fact, the only reason that this is possible here with the swamps and the tropical area of Ad Astra is because of, like we were saying earlier, the rupture that's nearby that's changed the climate. Because normally it would be more like Maine, like the climate would be more like Maine in this region. So it's always like, oh, I want to add this in there. Well, hold up. Like I have to tell myself, a big Chris, there's a whole world. Fortuna doesn't have to have everything. Like we can have, like I've mentioned to everyone here before, like the where Antarctica would be in this world, our southern pole is actually tropical in this universe. So Solara Tropica is the name of that particular continent, and so it's very different, right? We move the biomes around, to add some unexpected things that you wouldn't expect to see in our world, Um, we should talk a little bit about why we chose this particular style for the map for creating this. And I think it's best described as like we wanted to make this a map that wasn't that's like era appropriate, right? When I right before I met Ellie, I was talking to Ella and I was like, look, all the people who I know who can remotely make maps that I see online are usually people who do like fantasy maps, and that just doesn't work for what we're doing. We need a contemporary, like almost like a atlas map that would have been seen in the 90s, which is something that we needed to match the era to do this. Um, what was your process for doing that, Ellie, for like matching that particular style?
Well, first off, just like a good amount of research. Luckily, I am probably one of the last remaining I guess 20-year-olds whose parents had a roadmap in their car that taught them how to use it, even though it was totally never relevant in my entire life. But just like thinking about how the like United States interstate system works and trying to make something that's reminiscent. I know this isn't like the neon yellow that I feel like a lot of those roadmaps end up being, but something a little easier in the eyes. But trying to have that sort of vibe while also trying to have it be a whole world map. So trying to make it modern, like you said, like not a fantasy map. As cool as those ones are, something that'll fit sort of what your vibe of your RPG world is going to be.
Yeah, and I think it's important that like we could have done. So we talked about that. I remember us talking about like, well, what if we did it like a highway map? And the reason we went with this particular style was that we said, well, the highway map is too clinical, right? It's like it's too. It needed a little more personality to it so that people could understand the different, um, what the different regions felt like based on their topography. And so we went with this kind of hybrid of a highway map slash, atlas kind of feel to it that made it feel modern. Like you should, when you look at this map, you should be able to feel like this is something you could see on Earth, this particular country. And actually, for a long time before you came on to work with me, Ellie, was that like I obsessed over the shape of this country. And it's like most people will be like, okay, like whatever, it just looks like a blob. But for me, like I had this particular feeling that I wanted to capture in the shape of this country. And when I look at other large countries, they have certain contours in our world that are unmistakable. Like you look at China, for example, it has very, very specific contours and unique tendrils that come out of it. Um,
Yeah.
the United States itself is very iconic in terms of the shape of the country. So I wanted to kind of capture that with um, with what we were doing. And when we ended up making this final version of the map, and I had moved around some of the other countries, moving Paragon out and allowing Fortuna to capture that, not capture it politically, but like in the map, pull that area in and make it part of Fortuna, helped me make the shape I wanted. Now I was like, okay, when I look at this, this is the shape that I like this look, what this looks like. So for me, that's how I make choices whenever I'm trying to, do a fictional country. the shape is super important. It's not just, and I think a lot of people, maybe that's the same experience for you, Ellie, is where you're like obsessing over the landmass. I mean, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think shape's very important. Typically, when I do any sort of map making, I do a lot of fantasy making. It's either there's a trick where you can spill rice on a piece of paper and sort of trace the outline of that to
Yeah.
get like a very randomized shape. But also another thing that I'll try to implement when I'm doing stuff on my own is I'll take real world like borders. So like the United States, for instance, I've done a couple of maps where I just take the United States and then I sort of mash together different parts of it and use sort of the ocean line as a guide for how the shape's going to turn out and just like manipulate in a way where this is no longer the United States. It's a cool island sort of situation, right? So I think shape's definitely the starting point for any map making. So definitely one of the more important ones to focus on.
Do you feel the same way that when you find the shape you like, you just know it? Like, is it one of those things where you're like, oh God, it's not right, but then you make one tweak and you've gotten what you like? Or what's your experience with
Um, I don't think I'm as meticulous as you are about my borders. I definitely have an idea of okay, I want it to be this big in this general shape, but like
uh,
in the minute detail, I'm like, like this is gonna function, and if there's something cool that comes out of that, where there's a cool little piece of landmass that sticks out, or something like that, then I take it as like, all right, we're going to put like a cool port here, or like, how does this now influence what the world is? Whereas
I,
this one was a little vice versa, where it's like, all right, we know the world, we know the cities, we got to make sure that how do they function in this map that we're building?
I think I need to go spend. So you guys know I will spend more time with my therapist about my obsession over map borders. I'm sure there's
Oh my
some
gosh.
deep seated reason for that. But what I love that you were able to do too, if you compare the old map of the original concept map for Fortuna and this version, it's generally the same, but she added flourishes to the design to give it more personality. So if I go look at the old map here on the screen, you can see that yeah, this passes, right? This looks like generally like a map. But what she did was she took the coastline and some of these areas and she added way more personality to it. So if we go back here, you can see all these kind of like islands and little peninsulas that kind of jut off the side that help give it. And she carved in some bays. Like there weren't really any bays in the map originally, and she kind of carved those in, and just gave like these little. We have our own like little Catalina Island over here, So we got all these like regions that she was able to build in, and it made it feel even more real. And so I remember the first time I saw this after she added that, I was like, yes, this is feeling right. Another issue we had was in developing this map was that the original concept map had no lakes. There were really no lakes, no rivers. And how did you decide where you were going to, how you were going to do the rivers and lakes on this map?
Yeah, so again, lovely that this had a real world reference point, which was the United States. And so looking at how the United States river system actually flows was super interesting to see. Because, like, if you look at it, it looks like a neural network for like if you look at like a human body and they take all the blood vessels out. If you ever taken like an anatomy class, that's pretty common. Like there is too much to look at. That's sort of what the United States like water maps look like, and it's super interesting. So what I did was I was referencing it, looking at it, and sort of decided to try to put the waterways where, in reference to the United States, where the bigger waterways are going to be. Um, that being said, we cut. I think the Mississippi's gone. It does not exist.
Right.
But we definitely got a lot more of the West Coast, a little closer. Um, but then we wanted to run like a broken river down Pandemonium, which I think was a great idea. So that was definitely one of the cool ones to be like. And this one doesn't have a real world explanation geographically, but like it's going to be really cool if we put it in, so we're going to put it in.
And it's so funny you mentioned the river, the Mississippi River, because if you guys look down here, you can see this is the scale. This is about 100 miles. And this is what Ellie and I spent at least 45 minutes on this particular topic because we were trying to figure out like the scale, because the first draft that she sent me like physically looked beautiful. It was like this, but there was something off and I couldn't tell exactly what it was. And it was because we both agreed that it came down to scale, that everything looked Fortuna didn't look big enough because some of the sizes of the cities, the rivers themselves. I actually used if I remember, I got super dorky about this, and I went and looked at how wide the Mississippi River was in real life at like its widest point, and I used the scale on this map, and I showed Ellie. I said, okay, well, based on the scale of the Mississippi River, the one that you currently have drawn in here was like, what did I say, like 20 miles wide or something? So I said that was one of the things that we were able to address. We realized, oh, that's why it's not working in certain parts, was that we needed to adjust scale. So I think that's another thing if you're making your own maps, to pay attention to scale. It's no different than when I teach about drawing, and I know that Ellie, being a fellow artist, knows this as well. The importance of proportion, right? A lot of
Yes.
times when people are doing art and they feel like it doesn't look right, it's usually one of a couple things, but proportion is one of them. Usually
Yeah.
things are just like duplicating a character. Like when you're drawing a character and you want it to look the same over multiple drawings, you have to get not only the structure but the proportions of the character correct. I did a whole lesson on how to draw Hugo's head, and his head is divided into thirds. And if you don't do those proportions, it doesn't look like him, you know? And I would argue that that's the same thing with creating maps, is that one of the things that like, and I'm by no means like a professional cartographer. I just have had a obsession of maps since I was a little kid. I love geography, you know?
Yeah.
So do you have other things that you've run into when you're like making maps? You're like, oh, this is an area that I need, like trouble spots that you run into in maps. You're like, oh, this is what the problem was.
Yeah. I think it is, again, that idea that the artistic idea that you always start with your bigger shapes before going to the smaller ones. And so I think my biggest flaw is just wanting to get into like the nitty gritty, like, oh, I want to see all the little minute details, and then forgetting about the larger picture and remembering like you got to build down to that. Like you can't start with the micro. You got to start with like the big, interstates and all of that before you can go into like the cool little roadways. Also, yeah, I think the scale, just talking about scale in reference, like, okay, this is way too big, was probably the greatest project. Like if I had to summarize, what was the one big note? It was just really hammering down on getting the scale correct, because yeah, it definitely felt way too small, and just trying to figure out like what is the cause of that? Is it because the names are too big on it? Is it because the dots for the cities are too big? Like are these things, like what can we make keep really wide? What can we shrink down? Like how do we balance it where you can still read the map, but it's not so teeny tiny that it's just like micro, and trying to get it so you can really feel the scale, but also definitely use the map, right?
What was funny was that if you think about it, it's a lot of tedious work that had to be done to shrink everything. But the truth is, in the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively simple fix. We realized that the dots we were using, like she was saying, were too big for the cities. So it made the cities look, compared to that scale, it made like the dot look like it was, one dot alone was like 50 miles wide, right? So we're like, okay, that's one big thing. And then the sizes of the rivers. And we would look, again, getting super nerdy, but it's not just nerdy, but I feel like it's part of the authenticity that if you're going to do something like this, you should know what you're doing, right? And you need to do your research, and you need to compare to real world things. I spent a lot of time on Google Maps, for example, during this project, and Google Earth to go zoom out, look in, kind of like, okay, understand scale and find the scale that I wanted, and to see what the United States, for example, looked like at a certain altitude so that we could capture that. And what's funny was that that fix that we did with the sizes of the dots, everything was right. Everything that Ellie had done was correct, but it was those, because when I kept comparing it to like, we're doing the same altitude as this particular map on Google Earth. Why does this feel small? And then we started realizing, that that particular aspect of it needed to be dealt with. Um, you know, I always find that a large part of Fortuna, like Fortuna has about 160 million people, so it's a pretty large country in terms of population. And where you put the population centers, like major cities, also has to make sense. I love watching those videos on YouTube. There's some great videos about why cities in the real world are where they are, for real reasons. Like some are natural ports, some of them are, um, you know, crossroads. Like I live in Dallas, right? Like Dallas is in the middle of the United States almost. Like why is there this large metropolis right here in the middle? There's no water here, there's no ocean or anything nearby, but the crossroads of major railroads and highways and everything and major airports makes it a natural center spot for the United States for shipping and importing and international travel. So when you think about that, the decisions of where cities go, like especially on a map in Fortuna, you can make explanations as to why they're there. Big Dipper City, for example, where Hugo and Marco are from, is there. There's normally there wouldn't probably be a lot of population in that area, but there's large tourist fields there where they mine karma. A mine, it's more like, it's not really mining. We call it drilling for karma, but they're not drilling. They're siphoning karma from the environment from it. So that's over here. Um, I We also need to figure out, okay, where, like in this area here, you'll notice there's this little diamond here. This is where in this particular area where they've done lots of mining for the crystal, the special crystal material that's used to make canvases, because canvases are made from a special crystal. Those mines are in this area. Where we store gold is in this particular region. This is kind of our Fort Knox of Fortuna in this particular area, because there's a lot of gold mining that happens in these large mighty fallen mountain range that's there. So all that's purposeful. And it took me, before I even brought Ellie on to work with me, I spent, gosh, like 6 months just building the original concept for it and finding what we wanted. And then bringing an expert on to help me take it to the next level. So do we have, like, are there any like final thoughts you had, Ellie, about, by the way, it's hard having Ellie and Ella
Yeah,
together with me
it's
because
a
I'm
common
always doing it.
occurrence.
I'm constantly, and I know someone named Emma, and so I'm always like Emma, Ellie, like I'm always constantly like switching
Perfect.
between the names. But tell us, like, do you have any like final thoughts about your work on this particular map and where we're teasing kind of where we're going with other maps?
Yeah. So I wanted to address one thing. I don't think we talked about it. I think someone in the comments asked about the blue stars,
Oh, right.
um, which are basically military installations. Um, just like marking those. I wanted to mark a little bit more minute detail, but talking about the highways, we considered just leaving a lot of like the higher detail stuff to like city maps and things that are going to be a little bit zoomed in as far as scale goes. So I'm excited for when we have like a proper highway map and like with all the like naming conventions, and then getting to mark down like hospitals and different stuff, or like fire trucks and the ambulances and things like that, hospital adjacent like rescue department, city infrastructure stuff, which is going to be super neat. power plants. Oh my gosh, I'm just like spitballing. I'm like, I totally forgot about power plants. We didn't think
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Um, so just excited about like we're here right now. We get to zoom in later, which is going to be so fun. And then, you know, we're always working on new maps. I don't know what I'm allowed to say or not say, so I'll pass it off to you. But it's going great, and it's been super fun, and I'm excited to just keep moving forward.
Well, that's I'm glad you said that what you were saying earlier because the truth is um, when we were talking about the scale and what we wanted to build for these, we realized we couldn't like one of the things that Ellie had done that was really cool was that she had put hospitals, and we realized that for this kind of map, that was another thing that made the scale look small was that you could see the hospitals on this map, and we realized, oh, those are cool things we want to show, but we're going to show them on the zoomed in maps instead. And we're going to be doing other maps, like she said, like we're going to do right now. We just got off a meeting before this live stream where we are in the middle of mapping out what Wolfgang Academy looks like. And we threw some really crazy ideas. And I think that,
It's going to be awesome.
yeah, it's like we threw some really crazy stuff out there and just in this meeting, and it's going to be awesome. And I'm curious to see how that turns out. And sometimes, it's easier, in my opinion, in my experience as a creative director, to pull back instead of push. It's harder to push an idea, I feel, than it is to pull one down. Like, so starting from something that's like really like, okay, this is off the wall, and then be like, okay, what's the cool things from this, and how do we make it practical? You know, and so that's kind of the fun part about it because working within
That is
boundaries,
exactly.
right?
I was gonna say that is exactly what happened in the meeting
Yes,
as
yeah, we
well.
got pretty
It was like
wild.
we have all these ideas. It's gonna be awesome. We're gonna do all this amazing, fun, complicated stuff. It's like, okay, well, first we gotta like make it happen. Like we have to think about it first.
Right, we got
So
to thinking like, is that practical? Right, we went through this whole like, well, what happens if x this happens, and then the map changes? Like, so we had these things that I don't want to say yet because it's too early to tell you guys. But it was just not practical, or it could be. Like in that
it's gonna
meeting,
be practical. I'm
yeah,
gonna make it practical.
Ellie already started coming up with ideas how to make this wild idea we had for Wolfgang be practical, and so I'm pretty excited about it. So we will have a full. We're actually doing two maps of it. We're doing one map that is a. Would you say just like a campus, like an official campus map? That's like I don't know
Yeah,
how
like
you
a touring
describe.
map.
What is it called?
Like a it basically like is the graphic that they would use on like the little pamphlets they'd hand out to like tour groups or the ones that would they would plaster on like signage for like here you are here, how do you get to this part, so more of just like a simplified version of the map to make sure that we know exactly where all the buildings go and all the little pieces.
Yeah, and what's cool about that particular map is that it plays really well into the RPG too. Whenever we have stories that take place in at Wolfgang, you can actually see the map. It's more like the footprints of the buildings, like you can see everything. And then we're going to do a second map once we've solidified the ground floor of how everything's laid out. We're going to do the detailed map that will have buildings and it'll be rendered. We're going to use some of Ellie's amazing CG work in here too, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
excited.
so the last thing I was going to say was that it's so important doing this because with the launch of Flux Fantasy, the RPG on Tuesday, what's so important about having such a detailed map and why people like me who do this obsess so much over this is that you need a map so that people coming into this universe really have context. They need to understand where everything is, especially if they're building their own when they're building their characters in this universe. They need to be able to pick different what regions are their characters from, right? Because it's going to affect the personality, the upbringing of the character, their circumstances. And so I wanted to create, with Fortuna being the start of it's not only where the mainline story takes place, but Flux Fantasy RPG. I wanted to give it a lot of material for people to be able to make their own stories, pick their origins for their characters, and get a sense of scale of how big, if they're going to create a story that's going to go between multiple cities, you got to plan for that, right? Like, Andromeda, going from Andromeda to Big Dipper is like going from LA to Houston. That's like 1,200 miles. That's not a short drive, right? That's like a 2 or 3 day drive to get from LA to Houston. And so understanding that scale is also going to help make your stories more based in some reality that helps your storytelling and your game nights be, have bigger stakes, I think. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I think also just like there's one thing to have sort of a world map because that's so critical important to know where you are. But I'm pitching. I think that the Wolfgang like detail map is going to be so fun just because I think people are going to look at different parts of it and go, "Whoa, I didn't even know like that this could have this building or this really cool aspect of it." And I think just getting to look at a crazy fun like very I don't know is it a maximalist, I guess, a maximalist map, and getting to find like little details and Easter eggs and be like, oh, that's super cool. I want to include that in the next thing I'm working on. I think it's going to be like super fun for people.
I do too. In my time, like when I was producing, especially when I was producing anime that was based on video games, like when I did the Mass Effect anime movie, we wanted it to we wanted it to be, and it ended up being canon to the Mass Effect universe, but it was because we worked very hard for that to be the case. We wanted it to tie in so much, that movie, to the Mass Effect universe, that they actually referenced some of the events from our movie in the third game. So it was canonized in that way. And I say that because that's another reason why we obsess over the maps, is that when you read the next Flux Destiny book, for example, it's taking place in the same universe that you're playing the RPG in, and all the elements match. So whatever I say in the books about where Big Dipper is, or certain like buildings or landmarks or whatever, you are playing in the same world as the books. So that was super important to me that they there was overlap between the RPG and the book series, so that it wasn't just, oh, it's just kind of like inspired by, no, like one of my, like, I don't have lots of requirements, but one of them was that, because Ellie can tell you, I think I'm pretty easy to work with on this kind of stuff. I don't have like hard requirements where everything is like super rigid. But one of the requirements is that you have to feel like you are playing in the universe that takes place in the books, and that when you read the books and you're telling your stories, and I happen to go into one of the areas that you may have made a story in, you could feel proud that you were like you crossed paths where Hugo and Marco went, during the mainline story, sort of thing. So, anyways, I just thought I'd share that. Um, so Ellie, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I just really
Yes.
appreciate how much like love you put into this map. It like really shows, and I know the fans are really excited. And this will be in the core rule book when it's released um, on Tuesday. Also, you guys can buy it as a print. So right now, it's available as a print in the Flux Destiny print shop. So you can actually buy the regional map there right now. We're going to provide others as well as we do the other maps. You're going to be able to find them in there. I should also say that Ellie is doing all the maps that you see like in the upcoming the tutorial game, for example, that comes with the RPG. She did the battle maps in there. She does, like, we're going to be doing city maps, country maps, the whole world.
It's
That's
going
one
to
of our
be
big
so fun.
projects. Yeah, there's a lot going on. So we're insanely busy doing all that. So right now we're at Wolfgang, and I think after Wolfgang, we said we were going to do. We have so much going on. I forgot. I don't remember if we were going to the world or we were doing another battle map. I can't remember, but we got a lot going on.
Whichever
So
one, whichever one is more necessary at the
yeah,
time frame, right? But yes, again, well, thank you for having me. This was super fun, and it's been such a blast getting to illustrate all these cool stuff, all these cool things. Just because I feel like every like rendition of like another part of this world, like I feel like it just keeps getting better and better. So it's just been really fun.
no, I appreciate that a lot. And you guys, go to the if you go to I don't know if Ella can put in the comments the link to the print shop. Um, it's right there on the front. If you can't, if we happen to end the stream and you didn't get to, just go to our, um, if you go to like the Twitter or fluxdestiny.world, I think one of the top links is the print shop. So you can go there to go check that out. So, anyways, well, hope you guys had fun. Ellie, thanks again. So glad to have you part of our team here, and can't wait to do more of these with you.
Yes, thank you. Bye, everyone. I
All
hope you have a
right.
good night.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Good night.